I figured that since last time I talked about what I consider to be the worst character in wrestling right now, this time I'm going to talk about the worst faction in wrestling right now. And originally, this was going to be about Retribution. But honestly, there's no need to do so, because telling you that Retribution is bad is kind of like saying the water's wet. You already know that, I already know that, it's not giving you any new information. Besides from Ali, there's no characters in Retribution. If you look at their masks, that's their character. It's barely a faction because these are barely characters. And because of that, arguing it is kind of pointless. It's pointless because the group hasn't really done anything in WWE anyway. So instead of that, let's talk about a group that's been promoted way more and was a part of AEW's worst rated segment in its existence. Let's talk about the Dark Order. First things first, I want you to look at these guys. Like, really look at them. They look like the most generic group of bad guys that you've ever seen. They look like they should be fighting a team of Power Rangers as the Foot Soldiers. They look like they just escaped from a sex dungeon. It doesn't help that their main member for a long time and their leader was a guy named Evil Uno. Look, I know it's Spanish and he's a luchador, but it's a stupid name. All I can imagine when I hear it is like an evil deck of playing cards that wrestles, which would still be more of a character than Evil Uno is. It doesn't help that also for months, the group had no direction. They basically existed as a random bunch of goons in the background who were a part of a group that had no clear direction or desires. If you're going to form a cult, you need to actually explain what you believe in. If you're so dark, what exactly is your end goal? In any case, after months of nothing and the worst rated segment on AEW television, the Dark Order got its first rebranding, which is always a sign of things going perfectly, and they rebranded themselves as essentially a self-help group for disaffected losers. Essentially, they pulled a Fight Club, because it's not dated or cliche in anything at this point. And they ran some videos of a guy seeking advertisements and going to them and listening to their sermons. Again, I have no idea why anyone would join a group whose leader calls himself Evil Uno. Like, if you went to a group and the guy leading it called himself the Evil One, you probably wouldn't go back. It would be like if you went to a group and the guy leading it called himself Satan. It makes no sense as a self-help group to have a guy leading it like that. But after a few weeks of this, they decided what the group really needed was a leader, and there was all kinds of speculation as to who it might be. Guys like Raven, Johnny Polo from WWE, and Raven from ECW and TNA. A guy who is so old and broken down at this point that he probably shouldn't be wrestling. But for real, the guy had a long and storied career, and it's no shade to say that he's pretty awesome. But that's all the more reason to absolutely not draw such a person into this train wreck. Because it doesn't help that AEW has a bad habit of bringing in lots of guys who are so old that they can't take bumps anymore and making them into mouthpieces. What they're hoping for is to have the aura of the old guy transfer onto the younger guy. But what ends up happening instead is that it makes it look like their talent can't talk, which is not a good way to promote your talent. But that's a discussion for some other time. Back to the Dark Order. Situation was this. Dark Order was going nowhere. They'd been rebranded once already as a self-help cult, and it went nowhere. So now they were hyping up the mystery leader. A leader that turned out to be Brody Lee, fresh off of getting his release from WWE. And I'm going to be honest with you, Brody Lee is a great wrestler. He's also a good talker. And he was exactly what the Dark Order needed. And with a guy like him at the helm, they could rebrand themselves a second time, and he could do things like outline a mission. He could lead them. They could finally have a direction under him. And the initial result was not great. They decided to have him do a Vince McMahon parody, which, let's be honest, is never a good sign. Lots of guys have done the disaffected guy from another company angle, and sometimes it even works out. But it usually doesn't. However, Brody Lee was a legitimately good addition. It meant there was now a focus. And it got better when Lee entered a feud with Cody Rhodes over his TV title. Finally, direction, plans. It was great. And at the same time they were doing this, they began bringing in other wrestlers who weren't doing anything, who were in the lower card. Guys like Colt Cabana. And they were going to go out of their way to give these people motivation and goals. And that's a good thing. And it helped that the matches between Lee and Rhodes were really good. And basically everything was looking up. And then there was just one problem. Outside problems intervened. See, Cody had a television show to film, and so he couldn't be on television for a few months. And this was okay, because they wrote him off with a good angle and a great match, where Lee beat him and won the title. But then there was a problem. There was no plan for what they would do once Lee won the title. There was no plan for the Dark Order once Lee won the title. And so for months, Lee did nothing of importance. I mean, he had matches, but nothing about him or the Dark Order was furthered or developed. And despite being the champion, there wasn't really a plan to develop Lee or the Dark Order themselves beyond where they were. And so they ended up being in the same familiar purgatory that they had been in before, until Cody Rhodes returned from filming his television show and then immediately won the title again. Did this cause any developments in the Dark Order? No. They're still as underdeveloped and directionless as ever. Look, if you want to be the Ministry of Darkness, then just be the Ministry of Darkness. If you want to be the corporation, then be the corporation. If you want to be the flock, be the flock. Just be something. Have a reason to exist. AEW normally gives reasons for even the most minor characters to exist week to week, which is why it's all the more baffling that after a year, the Dark Order has gone exactly nowhere, and we're no closer to having any idea as to what they want, or what they're about, or what's so dark about them. It's entirely possible that the Dark Order might, in the future, develop a purpose and plan and move forward. But at the moment, they're directionless and have been for a year now, and it's time to do something with them or just pull the plug and stop wasting all of our time.